First of all, it's an honor to be here again, and I appreciate throughout this process the willingness of all of you to speak with the candidates, not only myself. This is not an easy process to navigate for anyone, I think, as you probably know. So the fact that we have warm smiles and warm greetings and just people embracing the process and willing to speak to all the candidates is greatly appreciated. So I sit here and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I might be a first in terms of Court of Appeals applicants, because every year my father and I take a Memorial Day fishing trip, and we had to postpone it a few days this round or this year because I needed to be here this morning. And so the reason I say it's a first is because if you were to look in the parking lot, you would see an SUV with a boat attached. Because we are on our way to Minnesota for a few days of relaxation and fishing after this interview is over. So if I accomplish nothing else today, I've accomplished that. As this is the second time that I've been an applicant in this process, I've had the privilege of speaking with most of you on more than one occasion. I've now been on the bench for 4.5 years in the district court, and I feel like I've sort of moved beyond that learning curve that a district court judge has when you are first appointed to the bench. Everything is new. Even though you've been a lawyer and you've appeared in courts in front of judges, it certainly is a different experience when you become the decision maker. As you know, I was appointed to the business court in April of 2021, and then I was fortunate enough to take over our drug treatment court in the 7th Judicial District in February of 2023. I bring that up because I've talked to many of you about the drug court and my passion for the drug court and our treatment courts in the state of Iowa. It was especially fulfilling last Friday because we had a graduation with 4 graduates, and 2 of those graduates were participants that I actually admitted in February of 2023. So I had the immense pleasure of seeing them move through the entire process and then reach graduation. And much of the credit for that goes to the team that we have, the drug court team. I'm just the captain of the ship there. But the moment I wanted to share with you was after graduation. We're taking pictures, and of course many of the graduates have family members there. And one of the mothers of one of the participants shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "Thank you for giving my son back to me." And I think that's something that I'll never forget. That's an invaluable experience and memory, and a very rewarding it was a rewarding experience for me. Oliver Wendell Holmes is quoted as saying, "The life of the law has not been logic, it has been experience." And again, that quote resonates with me because I vowed when I took the bench that I would never forget what it was like to be an attorney appearing in court, that I wouldn't forget what it was like to be a young lawyer meeting a client for the first time or appearing before a new judge for the first time, and knowing that anxiety that lawyers have when you don't know the judge you're appearing in front of, or when you're just starting out in this profession. I've known what it's like to pace the halls waiting for a jury verdict, sometimes waiting too long for a jury verdict. And I've known what it's like to get a good verdict with a client, and also to have to console a client after a difficult verdict. I know what it's like to have an anxious client tugging on your sleeve while you're trying to listen to a witness on the stand during a trial, because you need to concentrate on what you're going to ask that witness, not what your client wants to tell you about that witness. Service as a judge at any level comes with a great responsibility. A judge can't have a bad day where emotion overcomes reason, because at the trial court level, judges make very important decisions that impact the everyday lives of Iowans. That could be a decision in a dissolution matter. It could be a sentencing decision, an exercise of discretion, whether you're going to follow the prosecutor's recommendation and sentence that person to a term of incarceration, or exercise your judgment and say, no, I think this is a person that can be successful on street probation. So upon receiving the appointment to the bench, I vowed that I wouldn't shy away from a difficult case or a difficult decision. In my view, if you're not willing to take on that difficult case or make that difficult decision, then you shouldn't be serving as a judge. Also, you can't be swayed by public clamor or fear of criticism. I mean, that's in our judicial code of ethics, and I think that you have to keep that in mind every day when you're sitting on the bench. I also vowed that I would never, if at all possible, embarrass an attorney in front of his client in the courtroom, or her client, that I wouldn't be complacent in the role of a judge, and that I would work hard to issue decisions in a timely manner. I vowed to be a good colleague to other members of our team, because many times at a district court level, it sort of feels like you're in a law firm. You're all in it together, even though you're only one person. And of course, I had 26 years at a law firm, so I know what it was like to work with partners to navigate those disagreements and come to a decision that everyone could live with. So I've tried to bring that attitude towards every organization I've been involved in, including the nonprofit boards I've served on, the district court bench, the drug court bench, the business court, and I would bring that same level of commitment to the Court of Appeals. My attitude has always been, if anything is worth doing, it's worth doing well. When I was mentoring young lawyers in practice, I would encourage them, as many law firms do, to get involved in the community, but I would say, don't just do something for the sake of doing something. Do something that you actually have an interest in, because if you don't have an interest in it and you're just there as a warm body, people can tell. But when you are passionate about the organization you're working for, people can also tell that, and that's important. I would bring that attitude to the Court of Appeals. I think that's the same attitude I brought to the district court bench and to the other specialty courts I've joined. As a district court judge, I actually I kept track from the beginning of my career when I got appointed, because I wanted to be able to look back on my career and sort of think about my accomplishments. And at this point, I've presided over 25 jury trials. 2 of them have been Class A murder trials, 3 medical negligence trials in the civil arena, another Class B criminal trial involving the death of a child in a daycare setting, which was an extremely emotional trial, and a very difficult trial to navigate in terms of not only managing the litigants, but managing the crowd that was present in the courtroom every day. And then you can add on top of that, of course, numerous, probably twice that in terms of bench trials, family law trials, dissolution matters, other bench trial decisions that I've written. So if I'm fortunate enough to be appointed to this position, I would embrace the workload and challenges with the same vigor and enthusiasm as I have at the district court level. Appointment to the Court of Appeals is an amazing honor, and I would bring to that an attitude of humility, compassion, and obligation to support the other members of the judicial branch and the mission of the judicial branch. So with that, I would ask, are there any questions? Thank you.
And we'll start our questioning with Commissioner Picklap.
Hey, Judge, thanks for your application.
Thank you.
We have a number of district court judges in front of us today, all who are uniquely qualified. As I look what uniquely qualifies you, you touched on your experience with the drug court, but talk a little more about your involvement with the business specialty court, its role and what it does, and maybe how what you've learned there will translate to this seat.
Yeah, so obviously the business court is, you get into it either by motion or consent in terms of the attorneys who have cases that fit that role. They are dealing with business disputes. They tend to have excellent lawyers on them. They tend to have very meaty disputes where there's not always a clear answer. I mean, Iowa law, I think, is sometimes there's a dearth of Iowa law on a specific issue. So I think the one thing that comes to mind is, for instance, I had a insurance coverage dispute involving a matter of first impression in Iowa, that there really was no Iowa law on it. So I had lawyers citing cases from all over the country, including federal cases, and I am wading through that in terms of the record, the facts, distilling the law and trying to determine as best I can based upon where the Supreme Court has maybe gone in similar but not the same type of case, to determine how the court would look at it and how I should rule in terms of following the law. That case actually that I'm talking about is actually on appeal. I mean, I knew it was going to get appealed. There were cross motions for summary judgment, and the Supreme Court retained it. So we'll see what they do in the fall with it. But I think in terms of ability to handle the business court cases demonstrates I have the ability to handle complex matters that are going to come before the Court of Appeals.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stanger?
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Good to see you, Judge.
Good to see you.
We won't talk about the one mediation that we still are working on.
I thought that was
We're good. We're
settled.
Good.
Yeah.
You still have 100% record in the
Yes,
business
thank
court,
you.
just to clarify. Actually, what I want to talk about is, or have you talk about, is something you started with, and that is, this is not an easy process, and the practice of law is not easy, and litigants in the process have mental challenges, and which are the root maybe of some of the reasons we're here or they're here. You have an extensive background of dealing with mental health, and I wondered if you might just share with us what your service at Vera French and 180 and in the mental health world how has that contributed to you as a judge, and how do you think you would bring that forward if you were selected at Court of Appeals?
I think it contributes in terms of the compassion and empathy that you feel for people that are struggling with mental health or substance use disorder. Yeah, I mean, I was on the Vera French Mental Health Board, the operational board, for 9 years. So during that time, I got the opportunity to obviously interact with psychiatrists and mental health professionals. And then at 180, I was on that board for 6 years, and that really was dedicated to a sober living and sobriety and recovery. And so I think in terms that was a great foundation for me transitioning to drug court, because you have to have a ton of patience with people who have been either living with mental health problems or living with a substance use disorder for a long time. The change that we seek to bring about doesn't happen overnight, and you have to understand that it's a process, and there are going to be setbacks and slip-ups, but you have to have empathy for that and compassion for that, and a good team around you, which I have, to sort of fall in and offer those folks support. So I think the way that plays into the role in the Court of Appeals is obviously the Court of Appeals is seeing appeals in criminal matters for sentencing decisions, abuse of discretion decisions, and certainly that's a difficult, that's a high burden, but I think it does give me some insight and some empathy into at least reading a record that comes before me when I'm making a decision about that type of matter on the Court of Appeals.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hoig?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Spies?
Good morning, Judge Bert.
Good morning.
Having just returned from Minnesota, I want to assure you that if the fish aren't biting, the gnats are. You talked in response to Commissioner Stanger's comments about compassion and empathy at the trial court, and I translate that to the sensitivity that gives you the complexity of human motivation and credibility and all those things. Is there room for that on the appellate court bench too?
For
Empathy, compassion?
I believe so. I mean, obviously, you have to defer to the discretion of the trial court judge when it's an abuse of discretion standard, and I can't simply substitute what I would, it wouldn't be proper for a court of appeals judge to say, well, that's okay, but I would have done it differently. It's, if that's okay, then that's not an abuse of discretion. But still, I think my background gives me the ability to, at least an insight into discerning what's happening. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a tough question.
Good luck.
Commissioner Hardikoff?
Good morning, Judge Bert. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
Can you talk about, we had talked about the business specialty court. We talked about your experience as the drug court judge for the 7th Judicial District. Can you talk about your extensive private practice experience and how that would be a benefit to you being on the Court of Appeals?
Yeah. So I was in private practice for 28 years. I started in Davenport, initially with my Iowa license. I was on the court-appointed criminal and juvenile lists. I did some post-conviction relief work in those early years for about 2 years, and then I transitioned to the firm that I ended up spending 26 years with. I had an Illinois license by then, so my practice was in courtrooms all across Iowa and Illinois. And I think one of the big takeaways for me, that not only the experience in having to navigate, 2 sets of rules of civil procedure, 2 different statutory schemes, sometimes like work comp, Jerry, can't be more different in Illinois than it is in Iowa. But I think it also gave me exposure to, dozens and dozens of different types of courtrooms, different types of judges, different ways of handling courtrooms, different ways of dealing with difficult litigants or difficult attorneys or clients. And so I've tried to draw upon that experience to become kind of the judge that I would distill all of those people into when I'm on the bench, in terms of trying to maintain your patience at all times. Because half the time I feel like if a lawyer or a litigant loses their cool in front of a jury, and I think most trial lawyers would tell you this, it only looks bad on them, not necessarily on me as the judge. So if I remain calm and just try to bring the tenor of the courtroom down, hopefully I'm helping everybody, rather than a judge who's pounding on the table and yelling at everybody in the courtroom. So I think my experience in private practice is that, in terms of just being in front of many, many different judges in many, many different courtrooms and dealing with many, many different types of lawyers.
Commissioner Semmelroth?
I was, I guess, inspired by the vows that you made to yourself when you went on the district court bench based upon your experience as a practicing lawyer. If you would make it onto the Court of Appeals, what vows would you be making to yourself based upon your experience as a district court judge?
I would vow that I understand the difficulty and the time demands that district court judges have. I would vow that they're in a better position many times, especially on that abuse of discretion sort of standard, to make the call than I am, and that I would need to be giving deference to that according to the standard. Again, I would make the same vow that I would treat lawyers with respect and not embarrass lawyers on oral argument when their clients might be sitting in the appellate courtroom listening to the arguments. I would do the lawyers the courtesy of being very well prepared for their arguments so that I can ask good questions and so that they know that they're appearing in front of a court that is prepared. I mean, we've all been there. And that's one of the vows I made as a district court judge. I vowed to, as much as humanly possible, be prepared for the arguments or at least read the briefs and the filings that the lawyers file, because there was no more frustrating thing for me in private practice to go before a judge arguing a motion for summary judgment or any motion and realize the judge has not read any of this and doesn't know what I'm talking about. And so I think judges have an obligation to be well prepared for the litigants that come in front of them. Sometimes it's not always possible, especially at the district court level, and I also understand that. So those are some of the things that I would bring to the Court of Appeals.
Thank you.
And I see our time is up,
Okay?
which means the fishing trip commences.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Safe travels.